A few episodes back here on Viewpoint, we had a guest that the readers and listeners will, or viewers and listeners will recall, named James Harper, and he is a marketing expert and not a combatant. He's not a trained shooter. He's not a martial artist, but he was carjacked, and he talked on our show about how when he was carjacked, he got rear-ended very slightly. I'm sorry, I take that back. The car in front of him went into reverse and backed into him for a light bump on the front bumper, and then the driver jumped out and started yelling that he'd been rear-ended. And as he was doing that, he had Mr. Harper very distracted and kind of wondering if this was going to get bad. Then the man pulled his shirt up and revealed a firearm tucked into his appendix holster position, and then he drew the weapon and started to brandish it and wanted Harper's car. And Harper talked about how at first just kick-starting his brain, even the most primitive functions, was impossible because the whole thing was so far outside of his expectancy level, he couldn't even think with it. He couldn't process it. And eventually he put his car in reverse, backed up, and drove away, and there ensued a 4-mile-long car chase, which ended up in a parking lot of a high school. And he tells that story, and it's a charming story, even though it's terrifying the way he tells it. But it dovetails right into the things you teach about be ready for bad things to happen, and accept that they can. When I read in the news about people being victimized by whether it's an active shooter or just a plain mugging, the first reaction people always report is, I just couldn't accept this was happening, and therefore I couldn't deal with it. What advice would you give to someone who doesn't want to fall into that trap?
Well, it's literally a chapter right out of my book about becoming a hard target. One of the steps towards moving in that direction to become a hard target is to accept the fact that bad things happen and that they could happen right now, today. The split second you finish listening to or watching this, you walk outside, it could happen. So accepting the fact is number one. If you cannot accept the fact or even entertain the potential for it to be real, then you will never be able to go past that point. The second is to have the will to act. Let's say that you had to hit somebody over the head with a baseball bat or smash them in the head with a lamp or something like that, to defend yourself. Could you do it? Some people are just not emotionally or mentally inclined to harm another human being. So if you can't get past step one or step two, you're not going to get past step three. So those are examples of accepting the fact that this is real, especially in our day here today, day and age. And then number two, do you have the will to do something very violent, extreme physical violence, to protect yourself and your family? Do you have that will?
As in, could you pull a headshot on a guy that may be approaching your toddler with a butcher knife?
Right, something along those lines.
Do
you have if you have the technical skill? But I'm trying to say, without the awareness piece and without the willingness, you're not going to solve that problem with a hard skill.